won the evangelicals. We won with young. We won with old. We won with highly educated. We won with poorly educated. I love the poorly educated.
Honestly, that was one of my favorite moments from 2016 and all of that absurdity. Here's the thing, guys. He's not winning the way that he was winning before. If you look at the numbers that we're seeing, again, these numbers come out like every other day. Let's put up, we talked about white working class voters without a college degree. Let's put up Latino voters, and this is big. In May of this year, the approval among Latino voters was 36%. In May it was 20%, and in April it is 36%. I'm going to go backwards here. In April, disapproval was 59%, and disapproval now today in May is 71%. I wish we had that graphic to show you. There it is, because I mangled it. That's a big deal, Nina. He really used Latino voters to get him over the hill in a lot of key places, especially in some key districts in Texas. And Texas is a place where the state house is redistricted. They want to add a whole lot of new seats. It's also a place where Ken Paxton could have more trouble than he should have in a Senate race against James Tallarico.
That's absolutely right, Katie. I think all voters, so those poll numbers are stunning. I think all voters, not just Latino voters, are having buyer's remorse when it comes to this president. Promises made, but not promises kept. And he's been so vicious towards people, using ICE in the way that he's using ICE. And so especially if you're Latino, you're looking at this and saying, my God, I didn't want this to happen. Even people who voted for and supported for him across the spectrum, you will hear most say, yeah, I wanted some immigration reform. I wanted some people to be deported. But he said the worst of the worst. They didn't want to see American citizens gunned down in the streets. So this is absolutely buyer's remorse. And the president, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. And so the president has surrounded himself around people who refuse to tell him that the emperor has on no clothes, number one. And going back to something that Peter said about how he's branding everything, those weren't Peter's exact words, but there shows an emptiness there. Either the president is treating the United States of America and the assets of this country as his own personal Trump Towers, or on the other end of that, there's an emptiness there that this president has. So instead of doing the things that will get him written about in a very hopeful and strong way throughout history by changing the material conditions of people, he's not doing that. The only material conditions that he is really changing is that of his cronies, his buddies, the people that are closest to him, including his son. And he has no fear of consequence. Why should he? Because the Supreme Court of the United States of America did rule that a president in their capacity can do just about anything. So, no, the president is not worried about himself. He reminds me of the character in The Matrix, for those who've ever seen that, the first one, Mr. Smith. Me, 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 me. And it's catching up with him.
Yeah. He's got a bust of Winston Churchill in the Oval Office, and it makes you wonder how seriously, how literally he took Churchill's famous line of "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." Jake, let me read a little bit from Unidos poll. Finds that 1 in 4 Hispanic Trump voters say they would not vote for him again if given the choice. 2/3 of Latino voters disapprove of Donald Trump's job performance, compared with 30% who approve. 25% of Latino Trump 2024 voters say they probably or certainly would not vote for him again. That compares with 5% of Harris 2024 voters who say they wouldn't vote for her again. That's quite a discrepancy. On the 2026 House ballot, Latino voters back the Democratic candidate over the Republican candidate, 54 to 27%. Are they going to pick up all their seats, the Republicans in Texas?
Probably not. These are, let's just say this. These are very bad numbers for Republicans. We can't emphasize that enough. Number one. Number two, Republicans can have drawn maps in places like Texas and Florida based off of Latino voting percentages that probably aren't holding up. The 2 seats that they have in the Rio Grande Valley, which they tried to make more Republican, they're held by 2 Democrats. I mean, privately, Republicans will concede they are certainly not 100% certain to keep to win those seats. They are likely to lose them. Those are 2 seats with big Latino voting populations. In Florida, another state where Latino voters play a huge role, Republicans have, in some respects, in some seats, tried to bank on them for votes. They're not going to do it there either. So, no, these are bad numbers. And remember, Katie, this is in the House, like on a good day, a 3-seat majority. You know what I mean? This is not, it's not like, if I was talking about this yesterday with somebody, if the maps were drawn like they were drawn in 2010 or sometime in the last 15 years, like this could be a 40-seat night. It's not going to be that because it is, the seats are tightly drawn. This is not, it is not shaping up to be a good year for Republicans. And I'm happy to see Peter's nodding his head, which means I'm not saying something incredibly stupid.
Well, yeah, and they've tried to redraw so much that even when they redraw the maps and try to squeeze out every district they possibly can in some incredible configurations, you've seen those images of what these districts look like, and they're a mess. Even with that, they could potentially lose the House by a decent margin. And normally, as Jake, you were saying, it would be much larger. It's remarkable. We can talk about like the structural issues that need to be changed in our democracy and how gerrymandering is messing everything up. And, it would be nice if the people elected to Congress did something to fix that, although it's doubtful they will. But let me ask you, let me ask you, Peter, we can dream, about Gen Z men. I'm going to pull this out from the New York Times piece on the disillusionment that Gen Z men are feeling right now with Donald Trump. Owen Shine, 21 years old, rural Klamath Falls, Oregon, listens to the Manosphere, was disappointed by the tariffs. He said it would get bad because of tariffs, and he said it would get better. Mr. Shine said, we're still waiting. Lots of quotes in this piece from Gen Z men who are not happy with Donald Trump.
Yeah, look, I mean, there are things that young men think about when they think about the economy and cost of living that are slightly different. Renting, right? Housing affordability. That applies to lots of people, but narrowly, young men think a lot about paying the rent. They think a lot about groceries. They think a lot about healthcare costs. There's other things, too, that are in the zeitgeist, like crypto is down since Trump came into office. I talked about this a lot with you, Katie. We think of young men who voted for Trump as sort of the MAGA hat wearing bros that were on the cover of New York Magazine, like partying white men. White men moved to Trump more than other demos, but it's also working class, non-college Black and Latino men also shifted marginally to Trump. But the reason I was nodding at Jake earlier is that we always squint at midterm elections thinking there might be this way, this party can pull it out or that party. But you go back to historical patterns, or at least recent elections, and the fundamentals of this election are working so hard against the Republican Party and Donald Trump. One note on young men, speaking of that, is that in the Virginia governor's race last year, we have evidence of how young men shifted and how they voted. That's the closest thing we had last year to a battleground state. And while young men aren't enamored with Democrats, they still voted for Abigail Spanberger by 14 points. Abigail Spanberger, like no one's idea of an electric manosphere politician who's going to talk about, the Spurs Thunder on Theo Vaughn's podcast, but they were voting on the issues that mattered in an environment where Donald Trump was horrendously unpopular. I had the firm Election Navigate, which studies elections, State Navigate, crunch the numbers on campuses in Virginia last year, on HBCUs, but also like JMU, Virginia Tech, William & Mary, big public schools. Those precincts saw presidential year turnout for a off-year governor's election for Abigail Spanberger. It's unclear how many of them voted for her on these campus precincts. We couldn't tell. Are they young men? But the fact that campus turnout was surging that high in an off year just showed how unpopular Donald Trump was. And that was last November. So this November, it's even worse, his numbers.
I think that's a really good point to make, because we talk about how everybody is scared about our democracy, and we worry about apathy and people looking at the system and saying, this is a mess, I don't want to participate in it, hating both parties. When you're talking about presidential level turnout on a college campus for a governor's election, that should invigorate you. It should give you hope that people do care and they are paying attention and they will participate, even if they think the whole system is messed up. Nita, I want to give the last one to you. In that New York Times article about Gen Z men, there was one comment from a gentleman who said that he was bored of the manosphere. He feels like they just get on to viral culture war issues and like to complain. So he's over that. But then he looks at the Democratic Party and he thinks that Democrats lecture too much. He says both parties are getting it wrong. I mean, you worked for Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders certainly lectures, but he was never considered by Gen Z men or anyone really being somebody. He didn't feel professorial or like he was looking down on anybody.
No, because he had that grandpa effect, that loving but stern grandpa effect. And it was his authenticity. And that is why he won younger voters overwhelmingly, even, much more even beyond his own generation, because younger people across the spectrum saw in Senator Bernie Sanders' vision a hope for themselves. And that is probably why this president and Republicans are losing to those men, whether they are Black or white or Hispanic, as Peter was pointing out, is because they don't see a future for themselves. And so even if we expand that, Katie, to everybody, no matter what generation they rocking with right now, people want to know that they have a future, and young people are feeling more and more and more as though their future is slipping away. And it's not just a feeling. I mean, we see the numbers with that generations, certain generations can't expect to live as good a life as their parents or their grandparents. And so that's no deal at all.
All right. Nina Turner, really good to have you. Peter Hamby, Jake Sherman. I really enjoyed this last 30 minutes with you guys. Thanks for joining me today.